Hello guys, and welcome to part 2 of my Andy's Hobby Headquarters M10 Achilles build in 1/16 scale. This is roughly how I left the Achilles in the last video, with just the lower hull built up. In this video I'm going to get the running gear built, get a bit of painting done, and add a few touches to the upper hull. There seem to be relatively few parts to put on the exterior of this vehicle. One of them is the spare track holders on the front. Now, as you can see here, I can only really attach the top or the bottom brackets at the moment because the spare track pieces are sort of wedged in between, so they really need to be attached after painting. That's fine, and it also gives me a chance to play around with some options. So for example, on this Achilles here, you can see that we've got spare tracks on the left hand side, but on the right hand side we've got the tow cable and the teeth. So maybe I can do something like that. The Achilles also has these racks that go on the side of the hull. Again, I'm going to attach the racks at the moment, but not the track pieces that go into them. I'll keep those separate for painting. And because this kit shares a lot of sprues with the M10 kit, we have these circular mounting points here on the side of the hull that need to be sanded off for the Achilles. It's a nice flat surface, so that was fairly easy to achieve. The instructions would have you put all the tools and exterior fittings on the upper hull before you put the front plate into place, but it seemed to me much more sensible to put the plate in place first and make sure everything was nice and rigid. Equally with the engine deck, and that will also give me a chance nice and early to get rid of that seam line there between the front and the rear half of the turret ring. We've got some rather nicely detailed engine hatch doors here. I think before I put the upper hull in place, I might take some plastic card, paint it in black, and just stick it on the underside of those doors so that you can't see into the empty engine bay. Those doors do have hinges which I think could be made to work, although of course there's no engine inside. But I think with a little careful application of glue, you could make those doors swing open still. Lots of filler caps here for oil and lubricant and things like this. And we do have those markings embedded on the surface of the vehicle. A couple of fine details that go on the rear deck. In this scale they don't need to be in photo etch. These are the fire extinguisher controls, I believe. And here you can see where all that work drilling the holes earlier has paid off because it helps me align all of these tools. Again, I think there are a couple of mistakes in the instructions around here. We are told to put on 8 lots of these grab handles, E54. However, by my count, there should be 10 of them. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 at the back. And that certainly seems to correspond with the holes that I drilled as well. Many of those handles are used to align the various tools. Although I'm fitting them here, I'm not gluing them in place. I'm going to leave them separate and paint them separately. Normally I'd brush paint these on a smaller scale, but I think on a large scale they'll benefit from being airbrushed. We've got the usual arrangement of lights and grab handles and so on the front plate. And again, in this scale there's no real need for photo etch, so everything is in plastic. The instructions do give us an option here between these two studs in the centre and the studs with a handle between them. It's not mentioned anywhere which option is which or why you would use one versus the other, so for now I've left those off until I can work out which one I should be applying. Next up was the running gear, and it was my plan to build these up separately, paint them, paint the hull sides, and then add the running gear into place. You do have to be a bit careful here because the instructions often miss out the number of items that you need to build. So it tells you you need to build 12 wheels, which is fair enough and correct. But when it comes to building these mounting points here that you can see on screen now, it doesn't mention that you'll need 6 of them. Now okay, you can count that there's 6, but it will be useful to know how many to make because it's not initially clear whether they are handed or not. As it happens, they're not, so you can just build up 6 identical ones and they have got attachment points on either side for the left or right of the vehicle. Because of my painting plan and because of course the suspension is workable, I did deviate slightly from the instructions here. So I built up these sub-assemblies as much as I could, but I was aware that if we put this arm piece in here like the instructions would have you do, then painting is going to be much more difficult, especially with the plate on the front and again the arm and the plate on the back as well. Plus of course you're going to have to articulate that through the full range of movement while you're painting it to make sure you don't leave any grey plastic behind. And of course, because the movement is tight, it's going to end up scraping off the paint. So what I did instead was put the backing plate directly onto the lower hull. I built up the 12 wheels, and there is a difference between the inner face and the outer face here of these hubcaps, these wheels. So you do have to be careful to make sure you get the right one. And once that was done, I gave everything a coat of Tamiya primer and then a coat of XF1 black. So here you can see we've got those initial mounting points that I talked about earlier, and I've left the grey strip there because that's how they're going to be glued to the vehicle. We've got the various arms and suspension attachment points and so on there, all painted black. My initial plan was then to go over with the olive drab and I would be able to avoid going over the rubber. That didn't quite work out so well, but I'll come back to that in a minute. The individual wheels and the arms could then be attached. And that grey unpainted piece there was glued, but the axle at the wheel end was not, and that should allow the wheel to continue to rotate. The purpose of this black, of course, is that it provides a sort of shadow coat, so when I go over it with the olive drab, if I miss anything, at least we've got black rather than grey plastic showing through. Now you do need to be careful with these arms. 6 of them have text on them, and that should be facing outwards. However, that's not the only difference between them, and I'll show you a mistake I made in a moment. So I glued up all 12 wheels, each with 2 arms, and then I realised there are actually 3 different types of these arms. So if you see here, they're supposed to go into that circular hole in the back there on that plate, and that goes in there fine. That will rotate in there, no problem. But if we look at another example, some of those arms have slightly bigger circles than others, and in fact they won't go in to that front plate. They're only about 0.5 millimeter difference in size, but they won't go into the front plate. They have to go into the back plate. I'm recording this audio after I recorded the video, so hopefully I'm making some sense here. So you've got some arms with smaller circular attachment points and some with bigger ones, and all the bigger ones have to go on the rear side inwards towards the vehicle. I think the reason that Takom have done that is to force you to have the text on the outside, but I could have done that myself by reading the text. I did do that myself by reading the text, but the issue is the arms on the right hand side, which don't have text, are still handed, even though it doesn't matter which one goes in front and back because there's no text on them. It does matter because one is bigger than the other. Now yes, that's my fault, I didn't keep the parts separate in the bag, but let's face it, there's no real reason to make them a different size. A bit of a silly design choice, I think, there. Anyway, onwards and upwards, and you can see here that I've got the various sub-assemblies built and painted in olive drab. So of course we've got the individual wheels here, we've got those arms that pivot above them, and we've got the main sort of bogie mounting points and their front plates. Now while you're looking at this you might notice something. I've painted all of these in AK Real Colours SCC15 olive drab. AK have recently changed their real colour bottles, but nothing else, they say. So we've got the older style bottle on the left hand side. I had some left so I finished it off. And we've got the newer style bottle here on the right hand side. They do actually have different numbers. We've got 37 for the old one, 875 for the new one. But AK say only the bottle has changed. However, on the left hand side we have the old bottle, on the right hand side we have the new bottle. On the top we have the old bottle, on the bottom we have the new bottle. On the back we have the new bottle, on the plate on the front we have the old bottle. Quite different shades there. All of those were primered, all of those were black base coated. Now it's not a huge problem, although to be honest I do actually prefer the shade of the older bottle, and it will probably be will be toned down later on in the build with weathering and things like that, but I'm glad I found out now rather than say switching bottles between the main body and the turret. This is where my plan started to fall apart a little bit. I thought that if I black based around the wheel mounting points I could then attach the wheels and then simply spray olive drab around them and get everything covered. That sort of worked, but as you can see it's not a super nice uniform finish. So that will need some more work in the future once everything is built. Once the running gear are actually attached we can see they work really well. They roll fine and they go over small obstacles fine as well. So I was really pleased with that. The final step for this part of the build was to take these skirts and add the 15 mounting points on each one. And then align those to the bottom of the sponsons. Those sponsons will be attached in the next part of the video, and of course because of their position the underside had to be painted in olive drab before attachment. And here we can see with a few things dry fitted how the vehicle is taking shape. It looks pretty decent, I think. I know I have complained a few times about this kit, but it's not really a complaint, I'm just pointing out potential pitfalls. I have really enjoyed building this, and I am going to enjoy it, I'm sure, as the build continues. My next step is going to be to get the rest of the lower hull painted and fitted together. The big thing remaining now is the ammunition racks, and therefore a decision about whether I'm going to paint those in white or olive drab. There are arguments for both, and I have seen reference photos for both as well, so I will need to make a decision on that one. But that's going to do it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Many thanks for watching, and special thanks to my YouTube supporters and Patreon members. My video next week I think is going to be an aircraft, so stay tuned for that. Thank you again for watching, and until next time, have fun modelling.